Well, it is the third week of LCS with coverage brought to you by Alienware. I'm here on the second day with Revenge to talk a little bit about his performance that game against CLG and a little bit more. We'll get into that in a second. But first off, Revenge, a lot of people have been giving you praise over the course of this year so far for your performance. How do you personally feel you are performing?
Well, I think that I started the season off with the game against TL with like the solo kill on Alfari and just overall had some good plays. So I think that kind of stuck with the community a lot and a lot of people, which is nice, but I also do think that I've underperformed in line some games and it did result in us losing. So I think that right now I'm just working on my consistency game to game, but I think that we can expect me to definitely have performances like the TL game across or for the rest of the season in many of the games.
What has it been like working with? And I'm always terrified I'm going to mess up the pronunciation of his tag, but Gilioto, is that how he says it? Giotto.
Kyoto,
Okay.
yeah, that's
Okay.
better, yeah.
Giotto, obviously for coming from the coaching side. So what is it like working with him?
It's been honestly a huge surprise in a good way because I had a
With
very
low expectations?
well coming from academy and only having one coach before, I had quite low expectations on what a coaching staff and system actually does for a player, just because I think that overall, and this isn't just to like dog on my old academy coach or anything, but it's just the academy system and coaches in the academy system, at least last year, for most teams was very underdeveloped. And in my case, that was definitely it. And I think that the coaches in academy also just don't have the same level of experience that Giotto does. And he's pretty much taught me a lot about laning, macro, even micro in some cases. And I think that it's been just such a pleasant surprise. And I think that what people need to know as well about coaches that I think is really hard to like value and weigh, I guess, from coach to coach is that there's kind of a certain personality trait that I think certain coaches should have in terms of being a leader, kind of like controlling the crowd, being the team. And I think that he does that insanely well. And I'm really happy that I have had the chance to work with someone this good as a coach.
Yeah, I mean, do you think, because obviously Immortals I think is aiming to be more of a development roster and team. I mean, no offense to you and your teammates, but in comparison to the way TSM is bringing in Sword Art and stuff like that, right?
Mhm.
So how is he helping ensure that you guys are going to become kind of the next generation of LCS talent?
Well, um, Giolto has worked with top coaches in Europe. I mean, he was a top coach in Europe, and he has a lot of strategies and kind of ways that he approaches coaching the team that I'm pretty sure is much more unique than every other coach in the league, because I don't think that there's any other top European coach in the league other than Mithy, I believe. So,
Peter Dunn now has joined
and Peter
EG, and
Dunn,
he
right,
went to
and
Worlds,
Peter
yeah.
Dunn, but um, I think that he still has like an edge in a way because he's just has so many connections in Europe. He has had such a long track record in Europe and a very positive one. So I think that he definitely does something right, if not more right than some of these coaches, at least most of the coaches I believe in NA. So I think it does come to a certain point where it's, do us, the players, have the ceiling and the potential that we think we do to perform at the top, more so than does a coach just like make us amazing, right? And I think that honestly, from what we've all been showing game by game, I think that it's there. And it's just going to take a bit of time right now in the start to like really find our identity as a team, which is completely normal.
Yeah.
And I think that we are using Kyoto's like strategies and just coaching method in a really positive way so far, because I think that we've already improved so much from when we started scrims like about a month ago.
Oh, I also want to ask you about that game just now. It's always awkward because obviously I want to talk to you about you and the team, but also, CLG has got this interesting narrative around them with the return of Broxa and people wondering if they're going to be good or whatever. Oftentimes, I find the best people to talk to about it are the people that are playing them. So, what did you think of CLG in that match? And do you think like are there signs of life? I guess like is a dramatic way of putting it.
Um, Well, I mean, across all the games, CLG has been having decent early games where they're accumulating like small leads, sometimes bigger ones, and then they kind of throw. But I am a bit surprised by Finn. I think he's playing a lot better than what a lot of people expected, and even myself. I didn't really follow him too much, but I just didn't know what to expect of him, and I think that he's just playing surprisingly well. So I think that with the addition of Broxa, I'm not sure if what Broxa will bring that was just like completely different than Griffin, their old jungler, right? Or their academy jungler. We'll just have to see. I think that a jungler is like a really important piece of the team, and he can just completely change how the dynamic of a team is played. But from what we saw today, it was kind of, I would say, somewhat of a disaster. Like I think that the way that they were playing the game in the mid game and late game was kind of completely uncoordinated and just. I mean, I don't know. It just felt like we were punishing like a bottom team, like, and I think that that was kind of a bad sign of life, if you want to say.
Yeah, yeah. There's clearly a lot
Mhm.
to work on for them. Well, I do want to ask you about some interesting social media posts that you've been making lately, Revenge. Acknowledging that perhaps you will temper some of your statements here because your manager is on the line, but you are one of the few people, besides Vulcan, for instance, who have said anything about the conversation around the import rule. Thankfully, Andy did not come at you like he did with Vulcan, but you were basically saying that you don't feel like you would have been picked up this last offseason if there was no import rule, and sort of the need for teams to field North American
Mm.
talent is part of the reason why you are here. I think it's interesting because Vulcan is kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum from you, right? Where it's like he's obviously this established talent or whatever. So what is it that makes you sort of skeptical on teams and the import rule and all that stuff?
Well, reflecting back on the tweet I made about not getting on an LCS team because of the import rule, I think that that could be the case for some people in NA. I think that in my team specifically, I don't really think it was because I mean we do still have an import slot available. I'm not sure if a lot of people know that about our team, but we are actually like four NA residents. I mean we have two OS players and then we have Xerxes as the import.
Yeah.
So we technically do have an import slot available. So if our org did want to have an EU or Korean mid or top, right, they could have. And they chose not to. And I think that now reflecting on saying that still, I think that what I meant was if the whole league is in this mindset that, oh, we're versing every other team that can import five players, right? Well, now you're thinking, oh, shoot, do I want to take a chance on this NA player? Like when, oh wow, the whole league of top laners is just Korean and Chinese or EU tops who
European.
have been to
Yeah.
Worlds, right? Every single one. I think that that's when it begins to be into question whether or not a team would want to pick up NA solo laners or, you know, just NA players in general when they think to themselves and have this like mindset that NA players are just inherently worse and no, and these top teams like, C9, TL, TSM, whatever, are going to be filled with the top of every region. That begins to make orgs, I think, more scared rather and less likely to take risks. So that's what I meant by that. I wasn't really just speaking specifically to my skill level individually. And I think that to me is like I would say like the scariest thing I could see because we witnessed this happen when OS imports became NA residents. And I think that a lot of talent that got picked up in the academy leagues right now from OS were just kind of picked up just because like they're from OS and it's like, oh, well, they're from OS. They might be good. Like, let's just
Right.
get them, right? And it's like, well, wait, there could have been some other NA players who are better, who I know are better, but oh, we just got this guy because he's from OS. And it's like, and now he's not an import. And to me, that trend was probably the most worrying one when I'm thinking about, oh, now this can happen for every region.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think another question I wanted to ask you about this is just because you are more recently from the amateur academy, like the funnel of North American talent into the LCS. And there's been some speculation that, like, hey, this could also have sort of a suppressing effect on native North America's talent desire to try to like aspire to become part of the LCS because maybe a good analogy is kind of what we've seen with NA mids, where we've had seasons where we've had like one North American mid laner in the mid lane position,
Yeah.
and it's a lot of people speculate that not only is it because people are like, well, that's a good position to import in, but also because players who are North American might say it's better for me to go support and become a support player than a North American mid because it's just they don't hire people from North America for the mid lane position. So,
Hmm.
so do you think if the import rule was lifted or did not exist at the time, do you think that that would make you less likely to have tried to get into the LCS? Do you think if it gets lifted that other people, future North American players, might be less likely to try to aim for it?
I mean, I think it's person to person. Like, I have always been, since I decided to leave school and go pro, I've been extremely motivated to make it to LCS from the second I was put into academy at the start. And I'm not sure how many academy players have that level of motivation, but I think that all of them should if they are in academy. And I think that if they don't have that level of motivation, they should not be in academy. And I've always thought that. So I think that their confidence, if you want to call it, should never be wavered just because they have competition in the higher leagues. I think that if you are discouraged for that, then you're probably not going to make it from academy to LCS. You're never going to rise levels if you already don't have that innate desire and competitive pressure to want to go higher and higher and higher. And I think that not everyone has that. And the way that you find your inspiration to have that is just going to be different from person to person. And I will say that it is definitely worrying if the people who are selecting those to play in LCS completely give up on any talent because who is deciding who plays in LCS? It's not players, it's orgs and the management, the people higher up who, to be honest, these people don't always know the best about the league. Like they don't always know who has the best potential. They don't know anything. A lot of them.
What?
Yeah, a
Revenge?
lot.
You're suggesting that these guys are not experts at building award-winning championship rosters? I can't
I
imagine
mean,
where you would get that idea.
I mean, it might sound crazy, right? I just think
Just teasing.
like scouts are just depending on the team, right? I think
Yeah,
some teams definitely have better scouts than others. It's just I think some of them don't know what they're doing, and that's worrying. And I think that when you're looking at scouts who will then be deciding the future of if an NA player will ever make it into the higher league, it's a bit worrying
yeah,
because there's biases, especially if the scouts are not from NA, right? Like I think that there's plenty of biases that aren't talked about and should be enlightened. And we've seen it across teams over the years, right? So I think that that to me is probably the scariest part is who's actually deciding who plays in LCS and why. We don't
yeah.
even half the public doesn't even know who these people are that are deciding to play.
Right.
I think that our what our system was in Immortals was the coaches actually decided. So Kyoto and Mallet Clips decided that they wanted me, despite my academy year, to play in LCS because they studied my VODs, they saw my grind in the off season, and they wanted me to play in LCS. And I think that's fair, right? That was good scouting, I would say. I hope. But I think that some teams don't do that. I mean, if some orgs and scouts just look at Reddit, and if you looked at Reddit, in my case, Reddit just hated me and thought I was like the worst player in the world. So I I think that that's the scary part.
Yeah.
How do you actually scout talent, and how are we scouting talent right now?
Hey, I really appreciate all this. I think we might be a little bit out of time, but I do appreciate you giving your candid thoughts, and for what it's worth, like I wish that we knew more about how pro players felt about all this stuff because I think there are very few that have spoken up about it. So I do really appreciate it. Is there anything you want to say to any of the fans out there?
Yeah, thanks for all the thanks to all the fans who have been supportive about me since the start of joining Immortals. I know that it was, I guess, as a from a fan perspective, it was viewed as a gamble for this team, and I think that a lot we are rebuilt. We have rebuilt, so I think that we are kind of making new fans along the way. And for all of those who are sticking with us right now through like our early struggles, I really appreciate that. And for all the new fans from every win we get or whatever, uh, thanks a lot. And just keep supporting us. We're going to show good showings throughout the entire year. I think that by the end of the year, you'll be proud to be an Immortals fan.
Yeah. Very good. Well, thank you so much for the interview and for all the words and insight. I really do appreciate it. Looking forward to seeing what Immortals is able to do throughout the rest of the year. And for everyone else, you can check out the rest of my coverage of all things LCS right here on my YouTube channel. Did you know that Alienware actually gives me a ton of free reign to say how I want to promote their products and allows me to make really unique outros? And so I'm going to just say, by the way, you can go check out their stuff in the description, but I think they would not mind if I just took a little bit of a different tack this time and said, thank you to Alienware, but also, why don't you go, if you enjoyed this interview, tweet at the player that was in it and say something nice about something that you thought was interesting, or maybe something you've enjoyed about their play recently, because I think in the space that we are all in, sometimes it's a lot easier to criticize than to praise, and I don't know if people realize how nice it is to sometimes just see a nice message from somebody. So again, if you enjoyed this interview or there was something that you thought was quite fun about it, go ahead and hit up the player and let them know. I'm sure they'd appreciate hearing you say that. Let's just go hit them up on Twitter or Instagram or anywhere else.